A promising young model vanished during a night out with her best friend in Manila, leaving her family shattered and desperate for answers. But 12 years later, a fast food receipt clutched in her lifeless hand would expose the most horrifying truth of all, that her closest confidante, someone she considered a sister, had orchestrated the very betrayal that led to her brutal murder. Ann Rodelas, known affectionately as Jar to everyone who loved her, was just 20 years old when she disappeared on November 6, 2012. She was building a name for herself in the competitive world of Philippine entertainment, gracing magazine covers and working as a part-time talent for ABS-CBN, one of the country's premier television networks. But on that fateful November night, all her dreams were extinguished by someone who should have been protecting her, her dearest friend, Althea Altamirano. This case forces us to confront one of the darkest aspects of human nature, how jealousy and resentment can poison even the closest relationships, turning friends into something far worse than enemies. What makes this case particularly haunting is not just the senseless violence, but the calculated betrayal that preceded it. Ann Rodelas was much more than just another aspiring model in Manila's bustling entertainment scene. Born into modest circumstances, she balanced her budding career with academic pursuits, studying hotel and restaurant management at Arellano University. Financial hardship had forced her to temporarily leave school 3 times, but Jar's determination never wavered. Instead, she used her modeling income to fund her education, slowly but steadily working toward her degree. Her dream extended beyond the Philippines. She often spoke to friends and family about her desire to work abroad, perhaps in the hospitality industry, where she could use both her education and her natural charisma to build a better life. Those who knew her described Jar as warm, ambitious, and fiercely loyal to those she cared about. Among those she trusted most was Althea Altamirano, a fellow model who had become like a sister to her. The two young women had met through their shared involvement in Manila's modeling scene, and their friendship had blossomed quickly. They understood each other's struggles, the financial pressures, the competition, the uncertainty of trying to make it in an industry where beauty was abundant but opportunities were scarce. Althea and Jar would spend hours together, sharing their dreams and supporting each other through the inevitable rejections and disappointments that came with their chosen career path. They attended casting calls together, celebrated each other's successes, and provided comfort during the inevitable setbacks. To observers, they seemed inseparable. But beneath the surface of their friendship, something toxic was growing. The modeling industry in the Philippines, like everywhere else, was intensely competitive. Every opportunity that went to one model was an opportunity denied to another. Every magazine cover, every television commercial, every small part in a show represented not just income, but validation in a world where youth and beauty were everything. For Althea, this competition began to feel personal. She started to notice that Jaya seemed to be getting more opportunities, more attention from photographers and casting directors. What had once been a source of mutual support began to feel like a rivalry, though Jaya seemed oblivious to her friend's growing resentment. The situation became more complicated when Althea entered into a relationship with Fernando Quambao Jr., a man who would prove to be possessive and controlling. Fernando noticed Althea's frustrations about her career, her concerns about being overshadowed by her friend, and he began to feed into these insecurities. As 2012 progressed, the dynamic between the two friends shifted subtly but significantly. Where once they had shared everything, Althea began to hold back, to view their interactions through the lens of competition rather than friendship. She started to interpret Jaya's successes as personal slights, her friend's innocent comments as calculated put-downs. The breaking point came when Althea became convinced that Jar was spreading rumors about her personal life. Specifically, she believed that Jar was telling people in their industry that Althea already had children, information that, whether true or false, could potentially damage her modeling career in an industry that prized youth and availability. The truth about these alleged rumors remains unclear. During later court proceedings, there was no concrete evidence that Jaya had actually been spreading gossip about her friend. But for Althea, the perception was enough. In her mind, the person she had trusted most had betrayed her in the most damaging way possible. What Althea did not realize was that her own boyfriend was manipulating the situation, encouraging her resentment, and pushing her toward a course of action that would have devastating consequences. Fernando saw an opportunity to assert control, to demonstrate his power over both women by orchestrating something that would permanently resolve what he saw as Althea's problem. The friendship that had once been a source of strength for both young women was now poisoned by jealousy, misunderstanding, and the toxic influence of a manipulative man. As November 2012 began, the stage was set for a betrayal that would shock the Philippines and destroy multiple lives forever. November 6, 2012, started like any other evening for Ann Rodelas. The young model had plans to meet her best friend Althea Altamirano for what she believed would be a routine night out in Manila. She had no way of knowing that Althea had spent the previous days sharing her grievances about their friendship with her boyfriend, Fernando Cavebao Jr., or that Fernando had been quietly assembling a group of men to help him teach Jar what he called a lesson. The plan that Fernando had devised was cruel in its calculated nature. He had recruited Jaymar Wareji and Efren Talib, men from the Salam Mosque compound who felt indebted to him for past favors. At around 3 o'clock in the afternoon on November 5th, Fernando had approached them at their usual gathering place on Lanao Street, describing Jaya as a pest in Althea's life who needed to be dealt with. The men agreed to help, not fully understanding the extent of what Fernando had in mind. They arranged to meet the following evening, ready to carry out what they believed would be a simple intimidation operation. As darkness fell on November 6th, Jan and Althea made their way to the World Trade Center area in Pasay City. This bustling commercial district was a popular destination for young people, filled with restaurants, shops, and entertainment venues. For Jar, it represented just another evening with her closest friend, perhaps discussing their latest auditions or sharing gossip about their industry. But Althea's mind was elsewhere. She had been in contact with Fernando throughout the day, coordinating the timing of what was about to unfold. As they walked through the area, Althea was positioning her unsuspecting friend for the trap that had been carefully laid. At around midnight, as the two women strolled near the World Trade Center, Fernando and his accomplices struck. A Mitsubishi Montero pulled up alongside them, and several masked men jumped out. The attack was swift and brutal. They grabbed Jar and began dragging her toward the vehicle. In those terrifying moments, Jara must have looked to her best friend for help, for protection, for any sign that Althea would defend her. Instead, she watched in horror as Althea stepped back, making no attempt to intervene or call for help. The realization that her closest friend was somehow involved in this attack must have been almost as devastating as the physical assault itself. The men forced JR into the back seat of the Montero, covering their faces to conceal their identities. But Fernando had made a critical error. Despite wearing a mask, his voice and mannerisms were familiar to JR from the times she had met him through Althea. As the vehicle pulled away from the scene, with JR trapped inside and Althea left standing on the sidewalk, the young model began to piece together the horrible truth. As they drove through Manila's late-night streets, Jar pleaded with her captors. According to later testimony from Jaymar Wareji, who would eventually become a witness for the prosecution, she recognized Fernando despite his disguise and attempted to appeal to whatever humanity remained in him. JR, sorry, she said, using Fernando's nickname and desperately apologizing for whatever offense she was supposed to have committed. Her recognition of Fernando marked a turning point in the crime. What had been planned as a lesson was about to become something far more deadly. Fernando was furious that she had identified him. The anonymity that was supposed to protect him from consequences had been shattered by Jab's familiarity with his voice and mannerisms. In that moment, the crime escalated from kidnapping to something much more serious. The drive to the Safehouse in Barangay Culiat took them through the quieter residential areas of Quezon City. As they traveled, JR continued to plead for her life, trying to understand why this was happening to her, why her best friend had allowed it to occur. The men in the car remained largely silent, following Fernando's lead as he grappled with the complication that his victim had identified him. Meanwhile, in a move that would later be seen as either a masterful piece of misdirection or a sign of her genuine panic, Althea made her way to a police station to report that her friend had been kidnapped. She told officers that she had witnessed masked men abducting Jaya, presenting herself as a traumatized witness rather than an accomplice to the crime. This report would initially throw investigators off the trail, as they focused their efforts on finding unknown kidnappers rather than looking closer to home. Althea's performance as the concerned friend was convincing enough that police spent precious hours in the immediate aftermath pursuing leads that led nowhere. As the Montero approached the Safehouse in Culiar, Jar had no way of knowing that her ordeal was just beginning. The men who had taken her were operating without a clear plan for what would happen next, guided only by Fernando's increasingly desperate attempts to cover up his involvement in the crime. The betrayal that had begun with Althea's poisoned friendship was about to culminate in a series of horrors that would shock even the hardened criminals who carried them out. The safe house in Barangay Culiot, where they brought Ann Rodelas, was a modest structure that would become the scene of unimaginable cruelty. As they arrived, the gravity of the situation began to dawn on everyone involved. Though for different reasons, Jar understood that her life was in danger, while her captors realized that their simple plan to teach her a lesson had become something far more complicated and dangerous. Fernando was struggling with the knowledge that Jar had recognized him. The original plan had been to frighten her, perhaps rough her up a bit, and then release her with a warning to stop spreading rumors about Althea. But now that she could identify him, releasing her would mean facing serious criminal charges. The walls were closing in, and Fernando's desperation was growing by the minute. Jamal Waraji later testified about the events that unfolded in that house, painting a picture of chaos and cruelty that would haunt everyone who heard his account. According to his statement, they brought J.R. into one of the rooms where Efren Talib took her, while Fernando and Jamal waited in another area of the house. It was during this time that the true nature of the crime began to emerge. What Fernando had described as teaching Jar a lesson became something far more sinister. The sounds coming from the room where Talib had taken her left no doubt about what was happening. Jara's voice could be heard pleading, Huwag po, please do not, before falling silent. The assault continued for what seemed like an eternity to those listening. Fernando seemed torn between anxiety about his situation and a cold determination to see the plan through to whatever end awaited. The phone calls he was receiving from Althea only added to the tension. She was at the police station, playing her role as the concerned friend, but her calls to Fernando revealed the coordination between them. Okay, baby. Bandian narco. Just wait a minute, Fernando reportedly told her during one of these calls, confirming that this was not a random crime, but a carefully orchestrated betrayal. As the night wore on, the situation in the safe house became even more chaotic. Additional men arrived, including someone known only as Aldos, who seemed to view Jair as an opportunity rather than a person. When Aldos arrived and saw what was happening, he demanded his own chance to assault her. Ano ba problema? Ito lang ayan pa akong pagbigyan? Aldos reportedly said, "What is the problem? Why do you not want to grant me this favor?" His casual attitude toward the horrific crime being committed revealed the depths of depravity that Jar was facing. Jamar tried to assert some control over the situation, telling Aldos that Fernando had left JR in their care and that he should not interfere. But Aldos was persistent, eventually wearing down their resistance with his argument that if they were going to dispose of her anyway, he should be allowed to assault her first. Yon lang? Ako bahala duin. Itatapon yona rinlang pakinabangko muna. He said, "That is all? I will take care of it. You are going to throw her away. Let me use her first." The casual way these men discussed Jar's fate, as if she were an object rather than a human being with hopes and dreams, reveals the complete dehumanization that had taken place. The young woman who had been working toward her degree, who had dreams of traveling abroad, who had trusted her best friend completely, had become nothing more than a problem to be solved. When Fernando returned to the safe house, he brought with him a burger meal from McDonald's. This seemingly mundane detail would later become crucial evidence, but at the time it represented perhaps the last normal act in a night that had spiraled completely out of control. Jamar took the food and knocked on the door of the room where Jay was being held. When he handed her the meal, it served as a signal to Aldos that Fernando had returned. Aldos emerged from the room, casually announcing that he had finished what he came to do. The McDonald's meal that Fernando had purchased was offered to Jaya with the false promise that she would be taken home afterward. Aldos told her to eat the food and that they would release her, but Jaya, perhaps sensing that something was terribly wrong or simply too traumatized to eat, said she would prefer to wait until she got home. She had no way of knowing that there would be no going home, that the food in her hands would be the last thing she would ever hold. The men around her had already decided her fate, though the method of carrying it out was still being determined. It was at this point that the crime crossed its final line. According to Jamar's testimony, when Aldos asked what the plan was, Talib delivered Fernando's verdict. "Shoot to kill Dar, Sabini JR. Shoot to kill," JR said. The lesson that was supposed to teach Jaya about respecting her friend had become a death sentence. The betrayal that had begun with Althea's jealousy and Fernando's manipulation was about to reach its ultimate conclusion. In that modest house in Collier, surrounded by men who saw her as nothing more than an inconvenience, Ann Rodelas was about to pay the ultimate price for trusting the wrong people. The early morning hours of November 6, 2012, brought a horrifying discovery that would send shockwaves through Manila and beyond. As the sun began to rise over Quezon City, residents of Barangay San Roque in the Murphy area made a grisly find that would mark the beginning of one of the most disturbing criminal investigations in recent Philippine history. There, discarded on 18th Avenue like refuse, lay the body of a young woman. She had been shot multiple times in the head and chest, her life brutally extinguished in what appeared to be a calculated execution. But what immediately caught the attention of the responding officers was something clutched tightly in her lifeless hand, a McDonald's paper bag containing a receipt. The victim was quickly identified as Ann Rodelas, the 20-year-old model and student whose disappearance had been reported to police just hours earlier by her friend Althea Altamirano. The contrast between the vibrant young woman who had been pursuing her dreams just the night before and the broken body that lay before them was stark and heartbreaking. Detective Inspector Rodel Marcelo of the Quezon City Police District Criminal Investigation and Detection Unit was among the first senior officers to arrive at the scene. What he saw would stay with him for years to come. Jana's body showed clear signs of the torture and assault she had endured before her murder. The multiple gunshot wounds to her head and torso indicated that her killers had wanted to ensure she could never identify them or testify about what they had done to her. But it was the McDonald's receipt that would prove to be the most significant piece of evidence. In her final moments, perhaps in a desperate attempt to leave behind some clue that might lead to justice, Jar had maintained her grip on that small piece of paper. The receipt contained crucial information: the exact time of purchase, the specific McDonald's location, and the items that had been bought. Chief Superintendent Mario de la Vega, director of the QCPD, recognized immediately that this was no random killing. The methodical nature of the execution, combined with the fact that the victim had been reported missing by someone close to her, suggested a more complex crime than initially appeared. The receipt, he knew, would be their key to tracking down whoever had committed this atrocity. News of Jar's murder spread quickly through Manila's entertainment community. Fellow models, photographers, and industry professionals were shocked to learn that one of their own had been killed in such a brutal manner. Social media filled with tributes to the young woman who had been known for her warmth and determination, her dreams of building a better life through hard work and education. For Jar's family, the news was devastating beyond comprehension. Her mother, Luz, had been anxiously waiting for word about her daughter after learning of the reported kidnapping. The confirmation that Jar was dead and the horrific circumstances of her murder shattered a family that had placed so much hope in their daughter's potential for success. The McDonald's receipt became the focus of an intensive investigation. Detectives traced the purchase to a specific restaurant location and determined the exact time the transaction had occurred. This information allowed them to request surveillance footage from the restaurant's security cameras, hoping to identify whoever had made the purchase. The investigation revealed that the burger meal had been bought during the early morning hours of November 6th, shortly before JR's murder. The timing suggested that the food had been purchased specifically for the victim, perhaps as a final meal before her execution. This detail added another layer of cruelty to an already horrific crime. The killers had maintained the pretense of caring for their victim even as they prepared to murder her. As detectives continued to analyze the evidence, they began to piece together a timeline of events that painted an increasingly disturbing picture. The location where Jar's body was found was several miles from where she had been reportedly kidnapped, indicating that she had been held somewhere else for several hours before being killed and dumped. The condition of her body told a story of prolonged suffering. The medical examination revealed that she had been sexually assaulted multiple times before being shot. The brutality of the crimes committed against her shocked even experienced investigators who had seen their share of violent crimes. Meanwhile, Althea Altamirano continued to play the role of the grieving friend. She spoke to media outlets about her shock and devastation at losing someone she considered a sister. She described the kidnapping she claimed to have witnessed, providing details that seemed designed to send investigators in the wrong direction. But experienced detectives know that in cases of violent crime, those closest to the victim often warrant the closest scrutiny. While Althea's emotional displays seemed genuine, certain aspects of her account began to raise questions. Her description of the kidnapping was remarkably detailed for someone who claimed to have been traumatized by the experience. More concerning was her apparent lack of physical injury. If armed men had attacked her friend right beside her, why had she been left completely unharmed? The McDonald's receipt was processed for fingerprints and other trace evidence, but it was the information printed on it that proved most valuable. Armed with the time and location of the purchase, investigators began the painstaking process of tracking down surveillance footage from nearby businesses and traffic cameras, hoping to identify the vehicle used in the crime. As word of the investigation spread, tips began coming in from the public. Several witnesses reported seeing a Mitsubishi Montero in the area around the time of the kidnapping, matching the type of vehicle that Althea had described. Others provided information about suspicious activities in the Culiat area, where investigators suspected Jia had been held. The discovery of Ann Rodelas' body marked the beginning of a complex investigation that would eventually expose a web of betrayal, jealousy, and calculated cruelty that shocked even seasoned law enforcement professionals. The young woman's death had robbed the world of a promising life, but her final act of clutching that receipt would prove instrumental in ensuring that those responsible would eventually face justice. The breakthrough in the Ann Rodelas murder case came from the most unlikely of sources, the very receipt that Jia had clutched in her final moments. What initially appeared to be a simple piece of trash would become the thread that investigators needed to unravel the entire conspiracy. Detective Inspector Rodel Marcello and his team methodically analyzed every detail on that McDonald's receipt. The timestamp showed the food had been purchased at 4:37 in the morning on November 6th, just hours before Jia's body was discovered. The specific McDonald's location was identified, and investigators immediately requested all available surveillance footage from the restaurant and surrounding businesses. The security camera footage from McDonald's revealed a disturbing scene. At exactly 4:37 a.m., a man later identified as Fernando Quiambao Jr. could be seen purchasing a burger meal. But what made this footage particularly significant was what happened next. Fernando was seen handing the food to another man, later identified as Jaymar Waraji, who then left the restaurant. This discovery immediately shifted the focus of the investigation. Rather than looking for unknown kidnappers, police now had specific individuals to track down. The receipt had led them directly to the perpetrators, just as Jia may have hoped it would. Armed with Fernando's identity, investigators began building a profile of their primary suspect. What they discovered was deeply troubling. Fernando Quiambao Jr. was the boyfriend of Althea Altamirano, the very friend who had reported Jaya's kidnapping and who had been presenting herself as a grieving victim. The revelation that Althea's boyfriend was connected to the crime immediately raised questions about her own involvement. How could she not have known what Fernando was planning? Why had she been left unharmed during the alleged kidnapping? And why had she failed to mention her relationship with one of the perpetrators when speaking to police? As investigators dug deeper into the relationship between Fernando and Althea, a disturbing picture began to emerge. Friends and acquaintances reported that Althea had been increasingly vocal about her frustrations with Jaya in the weeks leading up to the murder. She had complained that Jaya was spreading rumors about her personal life, specifically claiming that she already had children, information that could damage her modeling career. Phone records revealed extensive communication between Fernando and Althea on the day of the kidnapping and murder. The timing of these calls corresponded exactly with key moments in the crime, suggesting coordination between them. Most damaging was evidence that Althea had contacted Fernando while she was at the police station reporting the kidnapping, indicating that she was simultaneously playing the role of concerned friend and criminal accomplice. The investigation team expanded their search to include Fernando's known associates. This led them to Jaymar Waraji and Efren Teleb, both of whom were connected to the Salam Mosque compound where Fernando was known to recruit men for various jobs. When confronted with the evidence against them, particularly the surveillance footage showing Jaymar receiving the McDonald's meal from Fernando, the men began to crack under pressure. Jaymar Waraji proved to be the weak link in the conspiracy. Faced with overwhelming evidence and the possibility of a death sentence, he agreed to cooperate with investigators in exchange for consideration during sentencing. His detailed confession provided prosecutors with a minute-by-minute account of the crimes committed against Jaya. According to Jaymar's statement, Fernando had approached him and Talib on November 5th, describing Jaya as a problem that needed to be solved. He had specifically mentioned that this woman was spreading rumors about his girlfriend's personal life and that she needed to be taught a lesson. The men had agreed to help, believing they were signing up for a simple intimidation job. Jaymar's account revealed the true nature of the conspiracy. This was not a random crime or even a kidnapping gone wrong. It was a carefully planned operation designed to punish Jaya for her alleged gossip. The involvement of Althea became clear when Jaymar described how Fernando had coordinated with her throughout the evening, receiving calls from her as she played her part in the deception. The most shocking revelation in Jaymar's confession was the role that jealousy and resentment had played in motivating the crime. According to his account, Althea had convinced herself that J-Ma was deliberately sabotaging her career by spreading damaging rumors. Whether these rumors were real or imagined, they had become the justification for an unthinkable act of betrayal. J-Ma also revealed the moment when the crime escalated from kidnapping to murder. When J.A. recognized Fernando despite his mask, calling him by his nickname J.R., and pleading for her life, Fernando realized that releasing her would mean certain identification and arrest. It was at that moment that he made the decision to kill her. The confession provided prosecutors with detailed accounts of the sexual assaults that Jar had endured before her murder. Multiple men had raped her throughout the night, treating her as an object rather than a human being. The cruelty of these acts, combined with the betrayal by her closest friend, painted a picture of suffering that was almost incomprehensible. Perhaps most disturbing was J-Ma's account of how casually the decision to murder Jar had been made. According to his statement, when Fernando returned to the Safehouse with the McDonald's meal, he had already decided that she could not be allowed to live. The food was presented to her with the false promise that she would be released, but Fernando had already given the order, shoot to kill. As more evidence emerged, the true scope of Althea's involvement became clear. Phone records, witness statements, and physical evidence all pointed to her active participation in planning and executing the crime. Her performance as the traumatized friend was revealed to be an elaborate act designed to deflect suspicion while her boyfriend and his associates carried out the murder she had requested. The investigation had uncovered one of the most shocking cases of betrayal in Philippine criminal history. A young woman's closest friend had orchestrated her kidnapping, rape, and murder over perceived slights and career jealousy. The receipt that Jar had clutched in her final moments had led investigators directly to the truth, ensuring that her killers would face the justice they had tried so desperately to avoid. The arrest of Fernando Quiambao Jr., Althea Altamirano, and their accomplices sent shockwaves through the Philippines. The revelation that Ann Rodelas had been betrayed and murdered by her closest friend captivated the nation, and became a symbol of how jealousy and manipulation could destroy even the most trusted relationships. The legal proceedings that followed would stretch across 12 long years, becoming a test of the Philippine justice system's ability to deliver accountability in cases involving complex conspiracies and conflicting testimonies. From the beginning, the case attracted significant media attention, not only because of the brutality of the crimes but because of the shocking betrayal at its heart. Fernando Quiambao Jr. was charged with kidnapping and murder, facing the possibility of life imprisonment or even the death penalty. The evidence against him was overwhelming. Surveillance footage showing him purchasing the McDonald's meal, phone records documenting his coordination with Althea, and most damaging of all, the detailed confession of J-Ma Waraji describing Fernando's central role in planning and executing the crimes. Althea Altamirano faced similar charges, with prosecutors arguing that she was the mastermind behind the entire operation. They contended that her complaints about Jar's alleged rumor spreading had motivated Fernando to act, and that her coordination with him during the kidnapping made her equally responsible for the murder. The phone calls between them during the crime, they argued, proved she was an active participant rather than an innocent bystander. J-Ma Waraji and Efren Talib were also charged with kidnapping and murder, though J-Ma's cooperation with prosecutors earned him consideration for a reduced sentence. His willingness to testify against his co-conspirators provided the prosecution with crucial insider testimony about the planning and execution of the crimes. The trial proceedings were marked by dramatic testimony and emotional outbursts from Jara's family members. Her mother, Ann Rodelas, became a regular fixture in the courtroom, determined to see justice served for her daughter. The pain and anguish of losing a child under such circumstances was evident in every appearance she made, serving as a constant reminder of the human cost of the defendant's actions. Althea's defense team argued that she had been manipulated by Fernando, portraying her as another victim of his controlling and violent nature. They contended that while she may have complained about Jar to her boyfriend, she never intended for those complaints to result in kidnapping and murder. Her attorneys painted a picture of a young woman who had been used by a dangerous man to carry out his own violent fantasies. Fernando's defense took a different approach, attempting to minimize his role in the actual murder while acknowledging his involvement in the kidnapping. His lawyers argued that the killing had been carried out by others, particularly the mysterious figure known as Aldos, and that Fernando had lost control of the situation once it escalated beyond his original intentions. The prosecution, however, maintained that both Fernando and Althea were fully responsible for Jar's death, regardless of who had physically pulled the trigger. They argued that under Philippine law, anyone who participates in a conspiracy that results in murder is equally culpable, regardless of their specific role in the actual killing. Throughout the trial, new details emerged about the toxic relationship between the defendants and the victim. Witnesses testified about Althea's increasing resentment toward Joe in the months leading up to the murder, describing how she had become convinced that her friend was deliberately sabotaging her career. Others spoke about Fernando's controlling behavior and his tendency to respond to perceived slights with violence. The case was further complicated by the length of time it took to reach resolution. The Philippine legal system, burdened by heavy caseloads and procedural complexities, struggled to move the case through the courts efficiently. Delays, postponements, and appeals stretched the proceedings across more than a decade, adding to the family's suffering and raising questions about the system's ability to deliver timely justice. Finally, on December 13, 2024, exactly 12 years and 1 month after Jaya's murder, Judge Caridad Lutero of Quezon City Regional Trial Court Branch 223 delivered the long-awaited verdict. The courtroom was packed with family members, media representatives, and members of the public who had followed the case throughout its lengthy proceedings. Fernando Quimbao Jr. was found guilty of murder and sentenced to reclusion perpetua, life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The court determined that he had been the primary architect of the conspiracy and bore ultimate responsibility for Jaya's death. He was also ordered to pay the victim's family 500,000 pesos in damages, though no amount of money could compensate for their loss. In a decision that surprised many observers, Althea Altamirano was acquitted of murder charges. Judge Lutero ruled that while the prosecution had proven Althea's involvement in the kidnapping, they had failed to establish beyond reasonable doubt that she had knowledge of or intended for the crime to escalate to murder. The court found that her complaints about Jar, while they may have motivated Fernando to act, did not constitute clear evidence of her intent to commit murder. However, Althea was not completely absolved. She was found guilty of kidnapping and ordered to pay 100,000 pesos in moral damages to Jaya's family. The court acknowledged that her actions had contributed to the tragic events, even if she had not intended for them to result in murder. The verdict brought mixed reactions from those who had followed the case. Jar's family expressed disappointment that Althea had escaped murder charges, with her mother Luz declaring her intention to appeal the decision. Masakit talaga kaya gusto ko madagdagan yung pagkakulong niya. Hindi naman mamamatay ang ako kung hindi siya ang naging dahilan, she said. It is painful, so I want her imprisonment to be extended. My daughter would not have died if she had not been the cause. Volunteers Against Crime and Corruption. President Arsenio Evangelista criticized the verdict, arguing that under conspiracy laws, Althea should have been held equally responsible for the murder, since her actions had set the deadly chain of events in motion. The act of one is the act of all, he declared, expressing his intention to support the family's appeal efforts. The resolution of the case, while providing some measure of closure, also highlighted the lasting impact of the crimes on all involved. Jar's family continued to struggle with their loss, their dreams for their daughter's future forever shattered. The Philippine entertainment industry was forced to confront the toxic competitiveness that had contributed to the tragedy, leading to discussions about how to better support young performers facing the pressures of their chosen careers. The murder of Ann Rodelas stands as one of the most heartbreaking examples of how jealousy and betrayal can destroy lives and shatter the bonds that should unite us. Her case forces us to examine the dangerous intersection of friendship, competition, and toxic relationships that can turn trusted companions into deadly enemies. What makes this case particularly devastating is not just the brutality of the crimes committed against Jaya, but the calculated nature of the betrayal that preceded them. This was not a crime of passion or a moment of poor judgment. It was a deliberate conspiracy that unfolded over days, giving the perpetrators multiple opportunities to reconsider their actions and choose a different path. The 12-year journey to justice in this case also highlights the importance of persistence in the face of systemic delays and obstacles. Jar's family never gave up their fight for accountability, attending court hearings year after year, ensuring that their daughter's memory remained alive and that her killers could not simply disappear into anonymity. Perhaps most importantly, this case serves as a warning about the signs of toxic relationships and dangerous jealousy. The gradual deterioration of Althea and Jar's friendship, marked by increasing competition and resentment, provides a roadmap of warning signs that might help others recognize when relationships are becoming unhealthy or potentially dangerous. The receipt that Jar clutched in her final moments became more than just evidence. It became a symbol of her determination to ensure that justice would eventually prevail. Even in her darkest hour, facing unimaginable cruelty from those she had trusted most, she held on to that small piece of paper that would ultimately lead investigators to the truth. If you found this case as shocking as we did, make sure to subscribe to Criminal Mind Cortex for more incredible true crime investigations that expose the darkest corners of human nature. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our latest deep dives into the most compelling cases from around the world, where we explore not just what happened, but why these tragedies occur, and what lessons we can learn to protect ourselves and our loved ones.